Hey everyone, Lisa here again. Another week's passed. I hope you've had a chance to be creative. Thanks for all the comments and the feedback. It really is so helpful. Let's get into this week's lesson, which is reviewing a little bit more of perspective, and then I'm doing a little scene that we could possibly start thinking about creating ourselves. I want you to, perhaps this week in the comments, pop something in that you would really love to put in a scene. So it might be a canal or a streetscape, like a little cafe setting, or just facades of buildings with plants, because then we can start to work on something and create something together. That's my aim, to actually help you do all the elements first. So if we do a canal with some boats or something, then yes, you know, I will plan to do a scene where we've got a little bridge going over a basic like canal view, because the facades that we've already learnt would suffice. So yeah, if you want to do that, that would be wonderful, and we can start figuring out what it is we're going to paint together. Okay, hope you enjoy this one, and again, all the feedback and comments I can get, the better for you and for me. Thank you. Enjoy.
Here I'm drawing a horizontal line, and this represents the actual horizon. It's called the horizon line. This little box represents a building, and this building at the moment is facing us and it's sitting on the horizon line. What happens when we turn the corner and start to walk around this building? We actually see a return wall of the building, and we're also seeing the front of the building. So the return wall is literally in real life going away from us. How do we represent that depth on a piece of paper that's flat? So we've got to show that it's going back. The front of the building, we've got height and we've got width. That's fine, we can show that, but how do we show the depth? That's why perspective drawing came about, to represent that distance from something close to us, going away, traveling away in the distance. We've got height, we've got width, and then we've got depth being represented on a flat piece of paper.
What it means literally is, if we can see an object's height and width, and it's this tall. There we go. Then the rule is that at this point, it's going back, and we can't see the walls behind it. But if we turn it a little bit, just like we did this box, we were like that. We couldn't see how far back it went, and we turned it, and now we can. So if we draw that, you'll notice that this side does not remain the perfect straight parallelogram. So these two lines here are parallel and these two are parallel. They're not getting smaller, they're continuing in straight lines equal distance apart. But when we turn it, can you actually see how your perception of it is that this seems to be going up, and actually this seems to be going down ever so slightly? Or it may look like it's flat to you where I have it placed. But the point is, they no longer look exactly like they would never run in to meet each other, this line and this line. But when I turn it, well, suddenly it looks like somewhere down the track, those lines would get narrower and narrower until they'd reach a point. And especially on this side, you can see that that definitely looks like it's going to end up meeting up with this line here. What that is the illusion of depth, and that means that that distance
Deceptively appears to be less and less
as it travels away from us. With the rules of perspective, the horizon line, HL, and it is horizontal, it's flat, not crooked, always horizontal. Start with the height of the building, because that's not changing, and we can choose a point on our horizon line. I'm choosing this very end point here, And I'm going to run a line from that point right through to the top corner of my building. Yeah. So on my horizon, and if you watched the video from last week, this is the point where you could stick your pin and have a piece of string if you didn't have a ruler. So again, I put my nib of my pen in the horizon, the vanishing point dot, and straight back. Now, because those lines are vanishing back to this dot on the horizon line, we can call this our VP, which stands for vanishing point. Going by the laws of perspective, if we've now got these two edges going away back to a vanishing point in the distance, we then can learn how to complete this side of the building by judging this distance. Now that's more confusing than I would want a beginner to try to understand. So what I'm going to suggest now is let's just add a line where we think we're happy with the building going back. The important thing is it must be vertical. Can't be crooked. Old buildings, yes it can, but we really just want to remain vertical at this stage. You can see there that that looks like it's going back. Now, we can't, for purposes of having a rectangular or a square building, we cannot keep this flat front because look, we've turned it. We're seeing both the return and the front. So the front now can't remain parallel. It looks like it's very subtly joining eventually a long way away. That's a common rule in perspective. If you've got a vanishing point that's quite close, which means one side of your building, the lines are quite severely angled, so your triangle you've basically drawn is quite sharp and short, that pretty much means that the other side, it's not close, it's further away. So I'm just going to work within what I've got here, which means I'm going to put my other vanishing point, it must be on the same horizon line, and I'm going to put my other vanishing point way over on the edge of my paper. If I had a bigger sheet of paper, or if I had a bigger film zone, I would continue it further, because this, when I draw exactly the same as I did here, now don't be tricked into thinking you're drawing from this point back, because look, the building is from this front edge now. The front edge is closest to me, isn't it, if you look at it this way? So we must always go from the edge or the face that's closest to us, and that edge there is the closest, the tallest looking. Remember, it looks shorter as it goes away. So I'll leave that there. This edge is this edge, and this is the top point of it. So I'm going from the top point to the vanishing point, and the very bottom point to the vanishing point. And now, we realistically, if something's front on to you, that's the true width. As you turn it, it actually becomes a little narrower. So I'm not going to put my line there. I'm going to put it just a little bit left of there. And again, that's sort of stuff for further down the track. But if you look at it that way, I hope you can see that that now becomes another facade. And this one may be in the sunlight, so it's not going to be the same colour or the same depth. Now remember what we did last week. Just to reiterate that in this situation, I do want to say, if I had a doorway here, which remember, even in old buildings, you know, they're going to be a bit wobbly, but we want to keep things pretty much vertical. And remember now, my horizontal or flat face angles of the building, sorry, the roof line, the tops of windows, the bottom of windows, the tops of doors, the stairs, the entry, it all has to go back to the one vanishing point because it's all part of this facade. Now for me to relate that to here, what I must do first of all is I'll generally figure out, oh well yes, it looks like the door's in the centre, which I casually thought I was doing it in the centre. I don't want to get too technical and make you measure everything. I want you to understand the concept. We will definitely revisit this. If you cross the diagonals of a rectangle or a square, you will find its centre point. So there you go. The door's pretty much centred, not over here, not over there. So then if I do the same to this weird shape here, no, it's not a proper square or rectangle, but the rule is that this is representing this, but on an angle. So the rule applies. So if I go from top left to bottom right, I'm going to do a really light line. Top right to bottom left, I'm literally crisscrossing my diagonals. Bam-o. That is where my door is going to be centered. I wasn't too far off, was I? Now, this is just a quick demo, but I really just want to show you the power of using this guidance system when you start to draw from life or from a photo you've taken or making things up inside of your head, a little street scene as such. So then I can see I've got my halfway point horizontally and I've got my halfway point vertically. So I can then say, hey, this building, the door's actually quite high, so it goes beyond the halfway point. So I'll bring it up, and then it goes, the timber hob goes out from that. So I'm basically lining this in with this as my guidance system, and this point helping me draw those correct lines. So whatever was a horizontal line here has now become an extension from the vanishing point. And I'm just drawing two lines back, and it's up to me to decide vertically. I'll just crop them off there and there. Now, what we're not seeing here is that door is recessed in. It's not flush with the wall. So what we need to show at this point is there's a little recess there. Well, if something's going away from us this side, surely if it's recessed, it's going back away from us like this side is. So if you can imagine a little return wall there in shade, and the door is set back a little bit. So I'm going to use the same vanishing point as this side here. That means we go back to the left vanishing point. We go to the point where the door is meeting the ground, which is here. And we draw how deep we want our recess to be. I'm just going to do a little bit. And then the next rule is everything that is vertical remains vertical. So I'm lining in these vertical lines. This doesn't have to be too neat because this is like an old piece of timber. I'm hoping you can see the relationship here between this flat surface and what we're creating here in 3D basically. So what happens when that little recess occurs? Well, can you see this little point here? That's truly the point where the door starts on the ground. So all I need to do is make sure the same rule applies, the guideline, from the vanishing point through my point here, and back in there is my door. And if we look at last week's, you can see that's what I did my little entry tiles on. That whole thing set up very similar to what's happening here. So again, I won't measure up the door, the vertical door lines. I'll just sketch them because I don't want to overwhelm you with this. But in the future, we are going to be learning how to do this. So you'll be very confident in understanding how do I measure all of these things. Now, just to reiterate with the windows, the same thing is happening. I don't know if I should go into measuring it, but I'll just talk you through the measurements. So remember here when we crossed our diagonals, we had a middle line. I'm going to do that once again with my new rectangle, which is half the original shape. Crisscross, crisscross, and that's going to be the center of my window, okay? So I've got my halfway here. I'm going to go up vertically, and that becomes my new rectangle. Point 1, point 2, point 3, and where this line hits the bottom line, not the door. We're back on the front again, the bottom line. So crisscross those diagonals. Just bear with me. And there's my halfway point. I go up there, that's going to be the centre of my window. I'm going to decide where to put the top and bottom of my window just by, again, projecting. And while I'm at it, I'm just going to project over onto the other side a little bit, because I know a window's going over there as well. If you look at my beautiful building here. And it's a little bit off the timber hob, so I'm just going to stop about there, I think. Okay. I can put in a narrow window or a wide window, whatever I like. It doesn't have to be square. But I'm just going to make sure it remains vertical. And if I want to then crisscross those diagonals, I have just found my halfway point for my centre window frame, or mullion as we call it here in Australia. I'm not sure what you call window mullions. I hope that you can see the importance of staying with the same lines. And honestly, if you get confused with which way to go and which line, just take it back to the simple thing. Have a box or something that you can use as a reference and go, which way is it going? And when you turn that angle, you'll see, oh, it's going to my, you can put a big R, right vanishing point. What's happening here? If we turn this way, it would be going to my left. But this side over here where we've got nothing drawn, that's going to the left. So we're not concerned with that at the moment unless there's a setback. And what we might do, again, to reiterate that, is we'll set these windows back. Now, I'm deciding how far back they're going to be set. A little bit less because that one's further away. This is getting really fiddly now, but what happens is, because remember it's going back, we've got to go back to the left-hand vanishing point. Now, because we're looking up at the windows, we're not seeing the ground line, we're seeing this top line into both. Then it needs to come through this way again, because we're talking about a horizontal line yet again. So back. May even leave it at this point, and we can do this as part of the next lesson, because there are some things I want to do on this side. So how about I just paint a little bit and you can let your brain recuperate. That return is the same colour as the return wall, because it's got the same light and shade conditions, and if it's made of the same material, it will be perhaps slightly darker at the top and at the edge near the door, but it's essentially the same colour. Exactly the same with these returns here. That's how you unify it and your brain can understand what is happening. The underside or the eaves can be exactly the same. Because I'm going to build on this, I'm just going to spend the rest of this doing a little bit of a mock-up of that street situation yet again. Wetting the paper first. And remember last week I had a few lines drawn, it was the actual opposite way, but a few lines drawn to help me with my staggered blockwork size. I'm going to do a very similar sort of thing, but just keeping those shapes flat and very blurry at the moment. I won't get into any detail on this until we've done a little bit more on our facade. Okay, that's probably perhaps enough for now. I'm going to do a short demo of a painting in a simple perspective, and just for you to watch. Okay, thank you for listening and watching.
I'm going to do a little study that reinforces for you the use of perspective, those vanishing points left and right, and the technique I'm mainly using is wet on dry. I hope you enjoy. Now I'm going to add to this next week, especially on the top left, which is why I've left the whole return face of the building empty. And also you may have noticed that I've been using a ruler, which is called brush ruling. And for next week we'll be doing brush ruling and some dry brush technique. So it's going to be a beauty. I hope you've enjoyed watching this little painting and that it's helped to reinforce some of the things we learned about perspective. Have a wonderful week and I can't wait to see you next time.